A couple of months ago, I went to visit my college friend Abe on the coldest day in 9 years, apparently, in New Jersey, and I enjoyed a nice little ride on the NJ Transit, and we went to H Mart and bought a lot of stuff, and I ended up taking home some leftovers. I bought some apples and pears for the week, just for snacking. 3 for $1, can't turn that down. I just bought them because this is how I shop, and I figured I'd give you a realistic week. I usually eat a mixture of leftovers and freshly cooked grains. So to accompany the 2 leftover items I got from H Mart, I just went through my fridge and pantry and took stock of all the ingredients I had and started jazzing it up. The first thing I decided I wanted to make was quinoa. I rinse it and I boil it, and I try to make enough for about 3 to 4 days worth. Eyeballing it, not really measuring anything. It's really easy to make on the stovetop because you usually go for at least a 1-to-1 ratio of grains to water. Adding a little bit more just means you might have to lift off the lid and cook off a little bit more of the liquid. I'm not really a stickler about texture, so if it's a little mushy, then it's a little mushy. I learned from that experience how much water I used, and it goes into my muscle memory bank for the next time. Next time, I'll use a little less water, or not. But I do have this belief that over time, our body remembers things. So the more you experiment, the more data you're inputting into your own AI. That's your brain. You have one. The other thing I wanted to cook this week was the parsnips that I had bought the week prior. They were already trimmed and peeled, and so all I wanted to do was to simmer them until they were soft. How you season these things is totally up to you. I obviously have a whole library of spices, so I just go ham choosing random spices sometimes, and sometimes I tone it down a little bit and just use 1 or 2. But most times I'm just throwing everything in there, because why not, right? Does it always taste good? No. Guys, I'm not a genius. It's not like everything I touch turns to gold. But I do find out over time, once again, what works and what doesn't work, and I learn from it. Every time is just an experiment, so experiment, please. And as always, don't forget to take your snack breaks. It is very essential to making cooking feel joyous. Just having something to nibble in between the steps, such a big part of the experience. It helps the cooking process feel like part of the journey, that you're enjoying something all along the way of waiting for other things to come to temperature and to come to tenderness. Here we're eating that Erewhon adjacent pie that I made in a previous video, and I still dream about that pie to this day. I'm not gonna make it again, but that's kind of the beauty of winging it, is that you never make the same thing twice. The delights, they just keep on coming. Somewhat new and definitely unexpected every time. Once the quinoa has soaked up most of the liquid, I take a turn and see if all the kernels are tender. I check the parsnips and see if they are fork tender, and everyone's just cooked in a good way. For once. And at this point, it's time to mushify. You know I like my mush, so I break out the immersion blender, I give it a little whiz, and then the parsnips just turn into a parsnip mash. Kind of like a potato mash, but a little bit sweeter and a little bit juicier. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody's brains, but mashed parsnips, juicier than mashed potatoes. And with that, we've arrived at meal number 1 of leftovers, mashed parsnips with fish cakes. These fish cakes are just perfectly seasoned and one of my all-time favorite Korean foods, with a little bit of Kewpie mayo on top. What is not to like? I absolutely experienced near nirvana with this simple little mushy dish. The fish cakes are a little bit chewy, they're a little bit al dente, they got a little bit of a bounce to them, but they're also kind of fried, so there's that deep umami sense of flavor that has a little bit of spiciness from the gochujang just soaking into it, and that little kick of crisp pickled jalapeno. Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. 9 out of 10. Couldn't believe how easy this one was, but just basically a mashed starch and you got a little nice leftover meal. Next up, we got a side of steamed quinoa and some pickled eggs. These are soy marinated eggs, deeply umami, deeply salty. They've been sitting in that marinade for a couple of days, so it's deeply saturated with salt. And unfortunately, I think I over-seasoned the quinoa for this particular purpose. Because it was over-seasoned, I can only give this one a 7.5 out of 10. It was just a little too sodium heavy, but the textures were great and I felt very nutritified. You know what I mean? Quinoa seems like a very nutritious thing. Eggs seem like a very nutritious thing. I tampered with the salt level by putting in a little bit of mashed parsnips and turned out fine. Had a delightful 2-part meal and had a lot of leftovers that we labeled for later eat. minutes. Here's my take on leftovers. Think of the leftovers as an ingredient and not as a finished dish. So I have quinoa here and I have mashed parsnips here, and they are now individual ingredients. They're not meals, they're there for you to assemble further meals with. So with that, we're on to meal number 3, a beady egg salad. I'm also pulling some ingredients out for another dish, so you just never know what I'm cooking up because I'm always cooking up different things at the same time, confusing myself and you. Confusion is the name of the game here, but as long as it delights you, then go ahead and confuse away. I am simply toasting some frozen slices of bread, and I'm cutting up a couple of soy braised eggs with some very, very strained Greek yogurt so that it's nice and thick. I'm chopping in some pickled beets while Memo stares at me, and he's staring at me so much that I decided that I need to offer him something. Oh my gosh, he's so cute. Usually he likes yogurt, but sometimes he doesn't. I never know what day it is, so I just keep offering him stuff and frustrating myself. He is really testing my patience. This is a good exercise for me, I think. Thank you, Memo. For our egg salad, I'm just going in with some nigella seeds and other seasonings to really jazz it up, and of course a little dollop of Kewpie mayo. Give it a stir, give it a taste, see if it needs something else while the bread is toasting, and I decided to go ahead and take out some pickled onions from probably months ago at this point, but it has a nice little crunch, a nice little acidity, and I'm also pulling out some dried purple shallot slices for a little bit of a topping sprinkle. This beautifully pretty and pink spread goes right on top of our toast. A little bit of purple shallot goes on top of that pink, and there you have it, our third meal, a beady egg salad toast. I'm gonna give this one a 7.5. I think it was a little bit too tart for me, actually. The labneh, the strained yogurt, was like a little bit too yogurty. You know what I mean? I probably need a little bit more mayo in there, but I just didn't want to eat a whole cup of mayo. But that's okay. I still enjoyed it. A 7.5 ain't bad, y'all. For the next dish, I wanted to taste that marinade for the soy eggs just to see how salty it was, and it was very well seasoned. Very, very salty. So I went ahead and chopped up the remaining parsnips that we didn't cook yet, and I thought, why not do a little soy braised parsnip? This time using a little bit of the jalapeno that's in that container, and we're just gonna go in with that sweet soy, salty, savory, spicy. Add a little bit of sesame oil in there and just let it steam with that little bit of marinade. Really going for like a slightly sticky, tender, creamy parsnip. And then on a separate project, I decided we needed to continue cooking this box of lasagna that probably expired years ago. And also this jar of mozzarella balls that I've had for years. Both of these probably have been in my pantry and freezer for 2, 3, possibly 4 years at this point, and it was just time. It was just time. So I start my pastas usually in cold water. I just really like looking at pasta in cold water coming up to a boil. There's something satisfying about letting them coming up to temperature together. Also, don't think many other people cook pasta from cold, so I like being a little bit contrarian in that way. I don't think it affects the end result that perceptibly. So I'm combining some mayo, tomato paste, and harissa together to make a lasagna sauce. We're making lasagna with the pasta and with our cheese, possibly with some beans that I have in the fridge. Adding a little bit of herbs and garlic powder ×2 to really season it up. Waiting for the sheets of lasagna to really be soft, malleable, and al dente. And I don't think I'm going to be baking the lasagna because I just don't want to turn on the oven yet. Instead, we're going to wait for the parsnips to come to tender perfection before it comes off the heat. And we're going to be using the same pan to make a stovetop lasagna. When I'm cooking, I like the cleanup to be as minimal as possible, and whenever possible, cooking multiple dishes in the same ware is like top of the list for me. I hate doing multiple dishes, especially washing multiple pans and pots, so anytime I can reuse the flavor and the vessel, I'm gonna do that. The parsnips are really nice, tender, a little bit sticky. It has soaked up all the seasoning and the egg marinade, and that little bit of jalapeno bite, so good. Just spicy enough to make you taste the sweet, take you up the heights of savory, dip you into the fiery licks of spice, wash you into the sweet ocean of mirin. For meal number 4, we're gonna be pairing our soy braised parsnip with a chili crisp fried quinoa. So I'm taking some chili crisps in my fridge and just cooking up the quinoa to reheat. And simultaneous to that, we're gonna start assembling our lasagna. I'm checking the beans. They look good. They smell good. Always check your leftovers. I'm mixing in that harissa tomato sauce to blend it into the beans. I'm going to take the quinoa off of the heat into my bowl so that we can empty out the pan in preparation for the lasagna assembly. This is actually perfect to stagger my eats with my cooks. I'm adding in some Kewpie because there's essentially no fat in this dish so far, and in order for things to taste good, you need some amount of fat, and Kewpie, the creaminess of it is unbeatable. I'm gonna give this soy braised parsnip and chili crisp quinoa an 8.5. Very, very hearty. It has all the flavors of the egg marinade, which melts really well into the parsnips, coated in the creaminess of the mayo. Nothing else to complain about. For our lasagna in our pot, I'm just gonna drizzle in what remains of the cheese ball oil that is already seasoned with herbs, so I feel like it goes well with the lasagna vibe. And at this point, I'm just going to start layering in the sheets of lasagna into the bottom of the pan. This is like the first step to where things went wrong, because unfortunately there's a lot of fond on the bottom of the skillet and not enough oil, so what you'll see is this sheet ends up sticking, which then ruins the whole construction of the layered lasagna. Created a very messy pile of deliciousness. I layered on all the beans, all the cheese, and mostly all of the pasta. And might I just say that the pasta felt really silky and nice, despite the fact that it had been sitting in my pantry for so long. Too long. The cheese was also perfectly fine in the freezer, so if you ever find yourself with a whole gallon of cheese that you can't eat immediately, freeze it. It will keep for years. I don't know, possibly a decade if you keep it nicely sealed and you don't have any power outages. And I waited for the crusts to kind of sizzle, get golden, get crispy. By which point the cheese really melted into almost a soup. The beans kind of just fell out of their layering. I guess there is a reason why most people bake their lasagnas, but I gotta say, this flavor might have been one of my favorite bites in our leftover endeavors. I had a few sheets of lasagna left over, and since there was a lot of cheesy oil seeping into the pan, I thought let's just cut them up and let them fry. So I cut them up and let them fry around the edges of the lasagna. Cooking for me is kind of like a game of Tetris, just seeing where things fit as they fall. You don't always control all the elements. In fact, you control very little of it, but you can decide what direction it goes into and how they fit together. And there was a lot of oil in that pan, y'all. It was delicious oil, but it was just a lot of oil, and I certainly wasn't going to waste that oil now, was I? So I added in the rest of our leftover beans, just letting them simmer in the leftover oil as I ate our pasta lasagna thing. And these leftover beans took on all the cheese fonds, all the seasoning, all of the amazing oil. Nothing was wasted. And so for the next meal, I just ended up eating leftover quinoa with these cheesy lasagna pizza flavored beans. And this might have been like my second favorite bite. I don't know. I think I just love cheesy pizza beans. I hear from the kids that it is trending on the TikToks lately too, pizza beans. I think we're just giving new names to old things to make leftovers feel exciting in a time of recession, which y'all go have fun with that. I'm all for having fun with less. That's kind of my brand. I gave both of these beanie concoctions a 9 out of 10, and the only thing to make it a even better dish is to add some fish cakes to it, so I did. Now we have cheesy pizza beans on top of stir-fried quinoa with fish cakes. Together, we can be more than the sum of our parts. If you haven't been keeping track, that's 5 meals already. Sorry, correction, 6 meals. All out of leftovers, and we still have 2 more. At this point during the week, I don't know if you've noticed, I haven't had any greens in my diet, and I was kind of dying. So I went to the farmer's market. I got myself some Japanese turnips, which came with greens. I rinsed off the turnips and the greens, and I decided to go ahead and blanch the greens, which is something that I do on a weekly basis. I basically blanch a whole pot of greens so that I can use it as an ingredient for meals throughout the rest of the week. Have my little vegetable, have my little vitamin, have my little color. You know, they apparently are good for you, and we should all eat more veg. In case you're curious about costs, these days this bunch of turnips with the greens cost me $3 or $4 at the farmer's market. Sometimes if I go later, they go on a little bit of a discount. I took some soy braised eggs, I cut them up, I mashed them up. I'm adding some chili oil crisp to them, a little bit of mayo, some extra spices, including nigella seeds for a pop of health and crunch. And after a brief simmer and blanch, the greens were ready to come out. I took out some cornbread from my freezer and decided to toast them on the stovetop. This is great for meal prepping, is just baking off some cornbread or bread and keeping it in the freezer for whenever you need a little bit of a carb lift. And as the cornbread was toasting, I was waiting for the greens to cool so I could squeeze most of the liquid out of them. It is easier to season greens if they don't have a lot of water logged in them. And once they were kind of wrung dry, I chopped them up into very fine shreds so that there was no major fiber strands left, making this easy to chew. Because I do have a theory that most people don't eat vegetables because they're tired of chewing. Like, is that true? Drop it in the comments below. Are you tired of eating vegetables because they just feel too laborious to chew? Or am I just a lazy one and I'm projecting onto everyone else? Which, fair. I probably do that too much. I decided to chop up the rest of the fish cakes, drizzling over a little bit of the soy egg braising liquid and adding a little bit of sesame oil, and I have myself a little nice salad, which I did offer to Memo, but even though he was a little bit intrigued with the fishiness, it wasn't fishy enough for him, and he decided he didn't want any of it, which is understandable. You know, he's not a greens guy, but I was a big fan. I am a greens guy. In fact, I don't feel good if I don't have greens for more than 2.5 days. So I was very, 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 very thankful for this salad. 8 out of 10. To my mashed egg salad, I added more of the jalapenos just to give it a little bit of a crunch, a little bit of a salt, a little bit of a spice, and then the cornbread perfectly toasted. I split them in half and I piled on the egg salad. The cornbread has a little bit of a sweetness in itself, which matches really well with the egg sweetness, natural sweetness, and also mirin sweetness. I think there was some sugar in that marinade. And with the toasty edges, the crunchy, soft, pillowy texture with the crumbly, creamy egginess, I really liked it. 9 out of 10. I offered this to Memo too, and he was actually very intrigued. I think he might be an egg guy. But yeah, that was all the meals that I made out of 2 H Mart leftovers, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to listen to this whole thing without my voice, here it is, ASMR. Smell this? Come here. Memo, come here.